It is Monday on Raid Shadow Legends, but you knew that. Now, if you're a player like myself or many others, you are probably gawping at Curse City map right now, and you've gotten stuck at some point because you've either needed to sort out gear for a certain stage, or you looked at a stage and thought to yourself, wow, how am I supposed to do this? I've only got useless champions of this. And here's where you are wrong. But don't worry, because this is not that confrontational. It's just that there are no useless champions in Raid Shadow Legends. Sure, there are some that are better than others, but every champion in this game is going to have some way to help you clear a specific stage. Although I would say that bringing Ultimate Death Knight to something like Dark Fae is highly inadvisable, but you get the idea. As every champion can inflict at least 1 point damage onto the opponent, and if that isn't quite what you want, then put them in a stun set, or put them in a shield set, or just pick someone who has some form of self buff, or not self buff, team buff, or ways to disrupt the opponent so that your actually good champions can do their job better. But obviously there are some champions, and in today's video we're going to talk about epics, who struggle to do even that. And those are the ones where if you are leveling them, it is truly because you have no other choice at all, and you'd have an empty spot otherwise. So we're going to go over 10 of them that, even if you put them on the most basic responsibility in the game, they're still going to struggle. Starting off is going to be Masked Fearmonger. The Jason at home that really should have just stayed at home. He's only really got single target hits that don't place the most disruptive debuffs in the world, and then he expects to kill people with mediocre damage to therefore have mediocre effects. He's not very good. Next is Relic Keeper, who is... he's kind of a new player filter in a way, because they typically have these really squishy champions or ones who are blue affinity. He lives because he's red affinity, he does this, and then he whack-a-moles your team one after the other, and new players stop trying to fight Relic Keeper defenses until they come up against things that are even worse, because you see random D-ranked players who have legendaries and whatnot. But that's besides the point. So next we're going over to Ripper, and you're probably going to start seeing a theme here. It's all of these attack champions who have low durability and single target hits and aren't particularly good at debuffs or helping their team. I almost said defending their team. And that is pretty much in most of these. So if you know what's happening here, then, well, stick around. You might as well. So Ripper has max HP destruction effects, which would be fine for Scarab King, except for the fact that Scarab King is either red affinity or green affinity, so having someone who's red affinity is about as bad as you can go for this. Anywhere else, he doesn't really do anything at all. He does even less than that. And this doesn't hit very hard despite having 50% defense shred. So yeah. He's one of those old skinwalkers from when they were just these ugly moose people, and nowadays the faction is less actual skinwalkers and more just beast folk. I feel like the only reason they haven't changed the name over to beast folk is because it would involve going over to everything that says skinwalkers and doing that. I would say just find and replace, but perhaps it's not quite that simple. So moving over to keep with the theme is ZXchi, who is Available only from Doom Tower as the Secret Rooms Fragment Collection epics, and despite the fact that it takes you well over a year to get this champion, I feel like if you got them in the first 2 months, you would probably have limited use for them. Again, they deal single target damage. Sure, they have a self buff, but this only ignores very basic forms of mitigation. And okay, great, you decrease this by 1 turn. It's a 14 cooldown. At least like reset it or something. Come on now, what is this? So to break the pattern, we are going over to Warden. Now, Warden, I think, is the only epic in the game at this point who places the rare versions of debuffs, well, the weak versions. Sure, this book's up to 100%, but it's a small version. Again, small version of decreased attack, and this champion requires an absurd amount of epic books for no reason at all, which probably isn't too much of an issue if you are someone who is like late game and you're sitting on hundreds and hundreds of epic books, but before then he's borderline non-functional. Even with the new blessing, I think it's called Nature's Bounty, that would make this strong weaken and strong decreased attack. You still have this weak increased defense, which is placed after he attacks, so it's not even like he can self-buff and then hit. If this was decrease defense, he would be sort of like a Stag Knight who could also place strong weaken with Nature's Bounty, but instead he's just, well, very, very stuck in the past. Going back to Skinwalkers is going to be Yagar the Insatiable. Now, you get this guy at day 60 of login. He's classed as a dangerous poison specialist, when really the only way he's dangerous is to your account progression, because you're wasting chickens, brews and whatnot to build this guy. Like, seriously, if you're brand new to the game and want a quote-unquote poison specialist, then just put an outlaw monk to 50 or something, and then feed him to someone else once you're done with him. So, yeah, Yagar the Insatiable is bugs with 50% chance, half time this does nothing. Again, this doesn't always place the poisons, and then this just does damage on a 14 cooldown. He's not good. Moving over to Undead Hordes, and we have Hexia. Now, Hexia was buffed in the past alongside several other epics, some of which actually genuinely appreciated the buff and now have some decent use, and others were just as bad because there are some champions who are beyond repair. And then eventually Palladium just decided to stop buffing epics, even though they're doing 2 every month anyway, so it's a snail's pace when there's so many of them in the game. So Hexia again is another attack champion who just does single target hits. Her damage and effect scale off her having debuffs on herself, which she doesn't really want because her defensive stats are pretty bad, and if you have like decreased attack on her or something, then she's pretty much useless. And yeah, I think you know how this goes by now. So moving over to Shinokin and Umotoge. I don't know how you pronounce this. So you can imagine what she does before I even say anything. Single target, doesn't do much damage, doesn't help your team. Yeah. And moving over to Night Revenant is going to be Pitiless One. Now, this is one where he actually has an AoE attack, so if you put him in stun set, then he might just contribute something, but Night Revenant has so much in terms of choice, and there's a whole bunch of other attack epics in a way, and I say his stats are pretty low, he doesn't do much damage, and yeah. Honestly, I could have said any of these 3 really, because they kind of more or less the same thing, and but I just chose Pitiless One because it was the first one that came into my head, and I gave Crypt Witch a brief pass because the decreased defense might help an actual useful champion on your team, even though herself is not that great. Also, you're welcome. So, next is another champion who has some kind of AoE, and it is Ender Moonbeam. Now, this champion could have no attributes whatsoever, and you would still want to fuse him because he turns into Lady Mikage by proxy. But as for himself, then he's not as bad as the first ones, which you can tell it's myself visibly trailing off to try and extend the amount of time you're listening to my god-awful Northwest accent for. But regardless, he's pretty laughable. This is a 40% chance. This might increase one random debuff by one turn. Thanks. And then we have Leech. But don't worry, because he gains 2 speed for every champion enemy under a Leech debuff. 2 speed. So yeah, bring him to Spider, put Leech in everything, he has 22 more speed, so then he can... I don't know. Do nothing. And then that brings us to... How many have we done so far? 9 out of 10? Okay, well, the last one I'm going to mention is going to be Verisk. Now, she was added as a kind of a guaranteed champion event back when Plarium vastly overestimated the value of either decreased resistance or increased resistance in terms of putting this on champions as like the sole effect of a skill and then doing nothing else. But really, you're going to have your debuffers have enough accuracy to land it on the stage regardless, so decreased resistance is always going to be useless, and past that, she doesn't really contribute much at all to your team. Although, it doesn't seem to bother her, she's finding it all quite amusing. So, yeah, that is however many epics it's been that are truly not worth mentioning in the same sentence as barrels. Everyone else either is at least somewhat more durable to not be dying to the first hit, or has some way to benefit your team in an actually useful way, or something else of the sort. Because even though most of them are not that exciting, if I look at someone like Captain Tamilia, then okay, she places increased defense, heals you, puts eye protection on the team. You don't really need like any sort of good gear for her, and she's going to be better than just not bringing anyone at all. So yeah, that's everything. See ya.